Most fly anglers make the same 11 mistakes with pheasant tail. And today I'm going to break down exactly how to fix these to have more success on the water, straight from my conversation with the legend himself, Craig Matthews of Blue Ribbon Flies. We're counting down to the top #1 mistake to avoid and how to fix it. But here's the big twist. These aren't just tips or mistakes. They are fixes you can make immediately. And today we're going to be talking about Craig Matthews' new book, Pheasant Tail Simplicity, co-written with Yvonne Chenard. This is a great book. We're going to get into it all today. But first, I want to give a shout out to our winner from the last episode, Michael Peterson, 7706. You are the winner of Wet Fly Swing Pro. Just reach out to me, Dave at wetflyswing.com. We'll get you access to Wet Fly Swing Pro. This is our community where we're building trips together. We're creating content, challenging everybody to get better. So go check in with that and let me know. Subscribe on this episode and leave a comment, and you'll be entered this week for a chance to win. Also, before we get into it, if you want to listen to the full episode with this, we have episode 824 of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. We'll have a link in the notes here. You can go take a look at that episode 824 where Craig Matthews is on. He talks about everything in pheasant tails. Today, we're breaking down, we're refining that entire podcast into 11 top tips, and we're reaching down to #1 today. So let's jump into it and let's get going. All right, the number 11 mistake that people make with pheasant tails is thinking that pheasant tails are only nymphs. Of course, the pheasant tail, famous pheasant tail nymph, one of the greatest flies of all time for sure, is out there. But most anglers stop there and they don't realize what Craig mentions is that dry flies, caddis emergers, soft hackles, midges, beetles, even bonefish patterns, and anatomous fish, pretty much anything you can imagine, pheasant tail is going to work. A good friend of mine, Jim Teeney, also uses pheasant tail, dyed pheasant tail, and he's caught fish all around the world. So again, it's not just for nymphs. If you're not familiar with pheasant tail, it's good on everything. All right, the number 10 mistake to avoid that anglers make on pheasant tail is fighting with dubbing when pheasant tail does a better job. And I am a big proponent of this because dubbing is not always the easiest. Sometimes it's frustrating, it's clumsy, wrong proportions. But 2 pheasant tail fibers, Craig says, are the perfect taper, the perfect color, and the perfect silhouette, and you never overdo it. So simplify it, and we're going to be talking more about simplifying it today as we go. All right, number 9. The number 9 mistake anglers make with pheasant tails is not reinforcing your bodies. So this is a key one today because we want to make sure that's one of the complaints people have about pheasant tail is that it can be flimsy if it gets eaten by some sharp teeth. So what Craig, the quick fix here is wrap your pheasant tail forward, then take your thread and crisscross back through it. These X's basically make the fly indestructible. No wire, no glue, none of that stuff. Really simple. All right, the number 8 mistake anglers make with pheasant tail is ignoring pheasant tail on dry flies. So we mentioned it before. It's not just for sinking down on the bottom, although it does great. It floats beautifully when treated, and it sinks naturally when untreated. That's the amazing thing. So Craig uses pheasant tail to mimic mayfly emergers we mentioned, floating nymphs, dry caddis, and parachute style emergers. And dries tied with pheasant tail look exactly like the real thing because they match 99% of silhouettes. So this is no joke. They wrote an entire book. We mentioned it, Pheasant Tail Simplicity, an entire book about this. All right, let's get into number 7. The number 7 mistake that people make with pheasant tail is overcomplicating the patterns. Fly shops are packed with complicated, layered, artistic patterns. Everybody loves that, but the trout actually don't care. And Craig says it plainly that trout aren't impressed by art. They're impressed by simple, functional flies they recognize. If your fly looks like a peacock exploded, you're doing too much. So remember that. Simplicity is the key, and that's why pheasant tail is amazing. All right, here we go. The beauty of pheasant tail. It transitions through life stages without changing materials. In the new book, they introduced 17 to 18 new pheasant tail patterns across mayflies, caddisflies, emergers, terrestrials, and soft hackles. One material, infinite stages, and covers it all. So just another shout out to Pheasant Tail Fibers, the Pheasant Tail book that's out. Since we're a little over halfway, just want to remind you to like, follow, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment if you want to get a chance to win Wet Fly Swing Pro. Do that right now, leave a comment, and you can get us to 3,000. We're going for 3,000, and then we're going to 3 million. Let's get to the number 5 mistake anglers make with pheasant tail, and that is ignoring how pheasant tail behaves in water. Pheasant tail fibers are dynamic, so untreated, they absorb water and sink beautifully. Treated, they become like little corks. So there you go. So untreated, the thing sinks, and then they didn't even realize this, right? They float like corks. So most anglers never use this intentionally, and Craig does. All right, we're getting down there. Number 4, the mistake that anglers make with pheasant tail is avoiding winter midges because they're too small. And again, as you get older and you got these things, you realize that those small patterns can be tough. But again, winter midge fishing is one of the most productive experiences in fly fishing. Craig's PTZ, his pheasant tail Zelon midge, is nothing but 1 to 2 pheasant tail fibers, a little shuck material, and that's it. And he's caught fish at 22 degrees, at 60 in the sun, with all conditions. If you skip winter midges, you're missing the easiest rising fish of the year. All right, let's get into number 3. Number 3 mistake that anglers make with pheasant tail is not using pheasant tail for terrestrials. So we mentioned this before, but Craig ties beetles with a pheasant tail underbody, and here's why. Beetles have to plop because they plop in the water. Pheasant tail gives weight, segmentation, and that perfect plunk that big browns listen for. Foam floats, and pheasant tail brings the realism. Same goes for pheasant tail ants. Deadly simple, deadly effective. We know how good ants are. You should always have ants in your box throughout the year. All right, we're getting close. Number 2, the number 2 mistake anglers make with pheasant tail is carrying too many flies instead of learning to observe. So this is a key. This is all about observation. We know the most important thing in fly fishing is observing, and not having a bazillion flies is going to secure and solve your problem. So this is a big one. Craig says most anglers use gear to replace the skill of paying attention. You don't need thousands of fly. You need to read the river. Using pheasant tail limits your choices and forces you to watch insect stages, fish behavior, and hatch timing. That makes you a better angler faster. So this is something, again, pheasant tail simplicity. The book really reinforces that it's not about having some special pattern. It's about matching. And we've seen that in, Euro nymphing is a great example, right? With competitive anglers. They are, fishing with flies that are just, don't look like anything. And, it's not the fly, it's how you fish it. All right. And the number 1 top mistake to avoid that anglers are making is not letting pheasant tail teach you how trout feed. This is the heart of Craig's philosophy. When you commit to tying and fishing simple pheasant tail flies, you automatically match emerger behavior, imitate crippled insects, capture segmentation. You can adjust the buoyancy like we talked about, read the river more carefully. It forces you to do that, and you understand feeding lanes and timing, and observing instead of guessing. So this is a key. Pheasant tail is more than material. It is a teacher. It forces you to fish like someone who actually understands the trout. And that's why Craig built this entire book around it. So we mentioned it before, Pheasant Tail Simplicity. You can get it right now. Check in with Craig Matthews. If you can check in with us, wetflyswing.com right now if you want to listen to this full episode 824, and want to give you a quick little glance at what that looks like. And just want to thank you for checking in today. This has been awesome. Been really cool to check in with you and share these top 11 tips. Anytime, please subscribe and you'll get the next one. We're going to be doing these regularly, these little, I'm going to call these master podcast classes, because there's some of the best experts in the world that are coming here, and we're refining and we're distilling out the top tips from every episode. So that's what I got for you. Thanks for checking in, and we will talk to you very soon.